What's up, guys? My name's Brandon, and welcome back to Apple Weekly. In this episode, we're going to be discussing even more new features in iOS 26.2. We're going to talk about when Tesla is going to add CarPlay, bad news for a certain Mac, what's going to happen after Tim Cook steps down, a crazy AirTag story, and more. Okay, so this week we saw Apple release iOS 26.2 Beta 3 and also Public Beta 2. Apple's been really weird with the public betas for 26.2. But anyways, in iOS 26.2 Beta 3, we did see some new features, and there were some that I did not cover in my initial What's New video. However, the first thing I want to talk about is the new AirDrop feature, because as you know, if you go into your settings here and then go into General and then down to AirDrop, you can see that down at the bottom we now have a new section that says Manage Known AirDrop Contacts, because it says you'll automatically appear for 30 days to people who have shared a one-time code with, who you've shared a one-time code with. And here's what that feature looks like. So you will be prompted to enter in a code that shows up on the other person's device, and then once you input that code, you will be able to send AirDrop files to that other person, even if they are not saved as a contact, and even if the other person only has their AirDrop set to contacts only. So you'll essentially be basically a contact without having them saved as a contact for 30 days if you have this turned on and you are enabled, to send that via the PIN code. And in my What's New video, I did show a demo of how this works, and a lot of people were confused, like, why would I actually use that? And actually, a user on MacRumors forums put out a pretty good idea as to why you might use this. So it says, this is a welcome addition for me working with my music students and not wanting to add contacts or another app. Setting up a temp code would help manage the transfer of shared music files privately in a busy and sometimes nosy public studio space. So yeah, obviously this is not going to appeal to most people, but it will appeal to some people who want to be able to share things via AirDrop, with a non-contact, but not have to rely on the other person to turn on the everyone for 10 minutes option in AirDrop. You'll still be able to AirDrop them when it's set to contacts only, even if you don't have them saved as a contact. Now here's another change in iOS 26.2 Beta 3 that I did not cover. So if we go into our settings here, and if we go into accessibility and then into display and text size, and we turn on reduce transparency, and then we go back and then we go into our display and brightness, and then go into liquid glass, and we change this to tinted, we have a brand new little menu here that says turn off reduce transparency. You cannot change the preferred look to liquid glass while reduced transparency is on. So you have the options now to turn off and use tinted, or just cancel. So when you have reduced transparency on, you're not able to toggle back and forth between these two. Now we also have something really interesting that's come to Apple Intelligence with iOS 26.2 Beta 3, but it's not for everybody. This is actually just for users in Japan, but it is pretty interesting because this update will now let users in Japan replace Siri with third-party assistants by using that side button. So basically, this side button now will be able to be mapped to another voice assistant, not just Siri. And Apple actually outlined this in their documentation that's titled Launching Your Voice-Based Conversational App from the Side Button of iPhone. And Apple says this, in Japan, people might place an action on the side button of the iPhone that instantly launches your voice-based conversational app. People expect the voice-based conversational functionality to be instantly available when they launch your app with the side button, so make sure to let them immediately use it by starting an audio session, for example, with AV Foundation. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see if that expands to other regions as well, but for right now it seems like it's only in Japan, but I would not be surprised to see that coming to the EU very soon as well, maybe even with 26.2 right here. So hopefully that comes to everybody with time, just to give us the flexibility, but we'll have to wait and see if that actually happens. Now also this week we saw Apple add a new digital ID to the wallet application. So we tap on the plus right there and we go to driver's license or ID cards, you will see we have a brand new option that's been added to the list, the ever-growing list. So Florida is still not on there, so I cannot show you a live demo of this, unfortunately, but we now have Illinois. So this week, Illinois was added where you could add this to your, digital ID. So this is something you'll be able to use at select TSA checkpoints and other areas, but this is a pretty cool feature that's been added there. You can see all of the states right here where you can do that. Now, speaking of the wallet application, we also have some new offers in the Apple Card. So if you have an Apple Card and you go to that and you tap on the three dots up in the top right and you go to rewards and offers, and then you scroll down, we have two special offers that just started. So we have one for earning 5% back at booking.com. You can see there's 16 days remaining until that goes until December 5th. And then also 5% back at Ace Hardware. And that also goes until, actually this one's December 15th. So one ends December 5th, one is on the 15th, and you will get 5% back on purchases there. And while we're in the wallet application, we should also mention something that launched launched this week related to the wallet, and that is for CarKey. So CarKey, as you know, is how you can control your car, start your car just from having your phone, kind of like you can with a Tesla, but that's launched on other, car makers. And just this week, we saw CarPlay now supports select Cadillac vehicles. So this was noticed by MacRumors, and they said Apple appears to be gearing up to add CarKey support to select Cadillac vehicles based on back-end code found by MacRumors. Cadillac is now on an internal Apple list of vehicles that offer CarKey integration. And speaking of cars and Teslas, we should also mention CarPlay support coming to Tesla. So last week, we mentioned the big news that CarPlay support was going to be coming to Tesla eventually, but we didn't know when or if it was actually going to happen. A lot of people are saying it's not going to happen until like 2027, 2028, or even later. But we got an update this week from Mark Gurman, and he thinks it's going to be happening much sooner. So he said this: Tesla has made some progress on that front. In 2022, it added Apple Music. A year later came Apple Podcasts. Then in 2024, Tesla debuted an impressive Apple Watch app. And now, finally, the automaker is planning to fully support CarPlay. As I reported last week with Ed Ludlow, the change could happen in the coming months, delivering a holy grail to iPhone-toting Tesla drivers. So we might actually be seeing CarPlay support in the coming months on Tesla. So I'd be very surprised if we see that. I guess months could be, it could be 12 months, it could be 15 months. I guess it's not super specific, but it seems like it's more imminent than maybe it appeared last week. So I'll be curious to see when that actually happens and how it's actually going to work. Now, this week we did not only see new updates for the iPhone, the iPad, the Mac, the Vision Pro, the AirPods, but we also saw a new firmware update for some chargers and accessories. So this week, Apple released new firmware updates for the 140 watt USB-C power adapter, the Magic Keyboard, and the Magic Trackpad. Now, Apple doesn't mention what was fixed in these updates, but I would imagine that these updates include security fixes and performance improvements. But again, Apple doesn't list it. That is just my guess. Now, let's talk about something interesting related to cases on the iPhone, because we got a really interesting rumor this week from Instant Digital on Weibo, and he's saying that Apple might have iPhone cases with touch-sensitive layers built in. So he said this: in the future, Apple will make great efforts on the official protective case, making it not only a decoration to protect the mobile phone, but also the protective case as the second touch interface of the iPhone to make the iPhone Pro more pro. And we've seen some patents about this in the past, and essentially what it's going to be, at least what we know so far, is that there are going to be certain touch-sensitive areas on the case that you can maybe perform system actions with. Like maybe you go down here, you could swipe this to turn volume up or down on the case, or maybe you can launch the camera control from a wider area by just swiping or pressing in on a part on the case, not necessarily on the phone itself. So certain parts of the phone will be touch sensitive according to this rumor, and also according to some filings for patents and things like that we've seen in the past. So that'll be pretty interesting. Definitely a pro feature, as average consumers will probably not care about that, but that will be interesting to see kind of how that works. Anyways, going back to iOS 26.2 beta 3, I have to talk about the performance and the battery life, because performance has actually been really good. So I scored the highest Geekbench score yet for this update, so 3891 single core, 9954 on the multi-core. And you can see how that compares to the past few runs. I believe this is the highest ever, at least for the multi-core right there. It looks like it might be for single core as well. So really solid results here on 26.2 beta 3. I've been really impressed with the performance overall, even before I took that Geekbench test. So I've not had any issues. Now, when it comes to battery life, I'm currently at 72%. So you guys have to let me know what I started with. But battery life for me on my main device, my 17 Pro, as of right now, has been fine. It hasn't been anything amazing. It also hasn't been terrible. So I've seen a lot more mixed reviews on battery life here with beta 3 than I had in beta 1 and in beta 2. So I'm not really sure what's going on. Some people are saying it's like, just fine. Others are saying it's the worst battery life yet on 26.2, these beta. So you guys let me know in a comment down below, because I'm really trying to, gauge where we're sitting with battery life. Right now, it's been fine for me. I've used it on my iPad as well and on my iPhone, both iPhones, and I've not had any issues. But if you've had any drain or anything like that, let me know in the comments. And if you are having any issues, hopefully that's fixed in the next round of updates, which should be going out next week. So I would imagine that next week we're going to see iOS 26.2 beta 4, most likely on the week of November 24th, if not on the 24th itself. Now, after that is where things get a little bit tricky, because we could see an RC the next week, or Apple could release the RC on the week of December 8th. It's going to kind of have to, it just depends on what Apple decides to do. But typically, typically there is a 2-week gap at some points before the final release, which could be either the week of the 8th or what I think is most likely the week of December 15th. But really, either of those two are likely at this point in time before Apple goes on Christmas vacation for a while until January. I've also had some people ask me if we're going to see a 26.1.1 update, and I would say that we still could see that. It would have to be in the next 2 weeks, I would say, if we're going to see it at all. So if Apple doesn't release it in the next 2 weeks, it might not be coming at all. We might just be seeing a double point update for 26.2, but I think it is still a good possibility of seeing a 26.1.1 at some point. But as I always say, it just depends on what Apple, deems necessary to push out a new update. Are there bug fixes? Are there security patches that need addressed right away? If so, we should be seeing that released relatively soon. If not, Apple may just wait until 26.2 and then, go on after that. Okay, so now let's move on to some more Apple news. And let's start by talking about something I never thought I'd say, at least it didn't seem like I'd ever say it because it seems so far away. And that is that Tim Cook might be stepping down as CEO pretty soon, but it might not be as bad as it sounds because he might not be leaving Apple altogether. So let's talk about it. So this was initially reported by the Financial Times, and they were saying that Tim Cook was to step down as Apple CEO as soon as next year. And they said this: John Turnus, Apple's Senior Vice President of Hardware Engineering, is widely seen as Cook's most likely successor, although no final decisions have been made. People close to Apple say the long-planned transition is not related to the company's current performance ahead of what is expected to be a blockbuster end-of-year sales period for the iPhone. But with that being said, Tim Cook is most likely not going to completely retire and completely part ways from Apple because it seems like he's just going to become the next chairman of Apple's board of directors. That's been speculated throughout the industry, and also John Gruber from Daring Fireball said this: I would also bet that Cook moves into the role of executive chairman and will still play a significant, if not leading, role for the company when it comes to domestic and international politics, especially with regard to Trump. So yeah, if you were worried about Tim Cook just never being associated with Apple again, in terms of being on the team, I don't think you have anything to worry about. I do think that these people are onto something. I do think that we are going to see Tim Cook stick around, most likely just as a board member, not necessarily as CEO. And of course, he still will be able to make some decisions for Apple as well. And speaking of people leaving Apple, we have somebody who actually has already left Apple, and that is the designer of the iPhone Air. So yes, the designer of the iPhone Air, he helped develop the phone, and he also starred in the introduction video for the iPhone Air. He has left the company. So his name, as you can see right here, I'm just going to call him AC. He's an industrial designer who recently departed for an artificial intelligence startup. His exit made waves internally, given his rising profile within the design team. So it seems like the design team at Apple really admired his work, and he really did kill it. I mean, if you look at the iPhone Air, it's received praise from everybody. I think everybody can, agree that the iPhone Air, just the design of it, is absolutely incredible. It's thinner than the S25 Edge. It's just amazing all around. The feel in the hands, the look of it, it's so premium looking. It's just an excellent design through and through. So he will be missed. I'm sure Apple will find another great designer, but that will be missed. AC will be missed. Now, speaking of Apple products that might not be continued for very much longer, we have to talk about some bad news for the Mac Pro, because apparently the Mac Pro is kind of on the back burner now, according to Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, because he said this in a new report. He said there's no longer an M4 Ultra in the works. A Mac Pro to support it was also nixed, and the next high-end desktop chip will be the M5 Ultra. So far, Apple is only focused on a new Mac Studio for the processor. That suggests the Mac Pro won't be updated in 2026 in a significant way. From what I've heard inside the company, Apple has largely written off the Mac Pro. The sentiment internally is that the Mac Studio now represents both the present and future of Apple's professional desktop strategy. So I kind of think that the writing was on the wall for this one quite some time ago. I think I actually said this in my very first Mac Studio video when I had the M1 Ultra. I just really did not see the need for really anybody to have a Mac Pro anymore. Of course, there are other cases out there. I shouldn't say anybody, but for the majority of people, especially professionals, especially work from home professionals, I just think the Mac Studio makes so much more sense with how powerful it is. So we'll have to wait and see how this actually turns out, if Apple will unveil another Mac Pro. But for me personally, I think the Mac Studio is just an amazing value for what you get, and it's just so powerful. It might not be as powerful as the next Mac Pro, Pro, but it's pretty close. And then finally, just as tradition, we have another crazy AirTag story. So this one's not nearly as crazy as last week's. I saw one of the top comments said that last week's AirTag story should be a Netflix documentary. I agree, it should. That was such a good story, but this week we still have another one, just not as good. But anyways, this time a musician in Georgia had his entire setup stolen while he was in the middle of moving. So Alex, who is an electric violinist and a DJ based in Atlanta, was moving, and so he had to pack up all of his gear in his car, which included 7 electric violins, one of which had his custom logo engraved in it. But that car ended up being stolen overnight, along with everything inside. He said the moment he realized it was gone, he panicked, not just because it was thousands of dollars worth of gear, but because he had a performance scheduled the very next day. Now, thankfully, he thought ahead and already had AirTags hidden in his equipment before the move. So of course, right away, once he noticed everything was stolen, he opened up the Find My application on his iPhone and started tracking them down. And it worked because it led him right to a nearby Guitar Center. So of course, he did find a way to get to the store, and right then, when he walked inside, he immediately saw a guy trying to sell his stolen instruments. So he was able to stay calm, and he pulled an employee aside and said, "Hey, that's my stuff. Can you stall him until police get here?" And sure enough, police officers did arrive shortly after, and they arrested the suspect, and he was charged with theft by receiving stolen property. And the police later said that the AirTags were key in making the arrest happen so quickly, and they encouraged others to use tracking tools like this, though they warned people to not confront the suspects directly. And as for Alex, he did not get everything back, unfortunately, but he did recover his main gear and made it to his show on time. And he said, "Even though I didn't get everything back, I got the core music equipment back, so I could still work. So I'm trying to count my blessings." So yeah, shout out to Alex for putting those AirTags in his musical equipment. Otherwise, he would not have made his show the next day, and he wouldn't have got paid. And of course, he would be out his gear, which I'm sure he loves dearly. So as always, as I always say to you guys, make sure you put an AirTag in anything that you deem of value. It's always going to at least give you a hope of getting it back. But anyways, guys, that's it for this week. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Apple Weekly. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Also, let me know all your thoughts down there about any of the stories in those comments below. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.